Former AMP Mideast Bureau Chief, and Ruthie Blum, Senior Editor at JNS. We're going to get started, but to get started, even though we're going to spend most of our session talking about Gaza, I want to bring up the news. Will it work? We're at a critical crossroads. The army is preparing to call up tens of thousands of reservists. The government is signaling escalation, and yet the hostages remain in Gaza. Why now? Why this strategy? And what is being prioritized? Military dominance, political optics, or bringing our people home? I'm Ayan Hoffman, and tonight on Insider, we're diving into the high-stakes moments with two sharp voices from opposite sides. Dan Perry, former AMP Mideast Bureau Chief, and Ruthie Blum, Senior Editor at JNS. We're going to get started, but to get started, even though we're going to spend most of our session talking about Gaza, I want to bring up the news that just came out. Israel has called on, the IDF has called on the people of Yemen to evacuate the Sana'a airport, indicating that we might strike at any moment. Dan, is this a smart move, and what could be the implications?
Israel can't possibly look the other way when the Houthis continue to bombard it. About 4 attacks, I think, in the past week, and in one case they get lucky. And there's a landing very near the airport. Now we have cancellations of many, if not most, international airlines for much of this week, and who knows when that will end. So they had to strike back, and I fully support it. I'm rather a hawk on Yemen. I mean, I think the Houthis just need to be crushed. Their brazen chutzpah cannot be tolerated whatsoever. But it must be said, I'm not so sure that they can be deterred by airstrikes or even by what looks to be perhaps an imminent attack on Sana'a airport, because they don't care about their population. They don't care about the consequences. Their fanaticism is possibly more extreme than that of Hamas, because they don't even have a case against Israel, yet their slogan is death to Israel, death to America. So I fear, in the end, for this to really work, will require a ground assault that will defeat them on the ground in Gaza. Not by Israel, not by Israel, probably by the internationally recognized government, backed by Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and backed from the air by Western and U.S. forces. I think Israel, even though it had to react in this case, is a side player in a fight that must be escalated, and not just for Israel's sake, and not just for the sake of Yemenis, 400,000 who have died over the last decade because of the Houthis, but regional countries are suffering. Egypt has lost billions in revenue.
Right, because of the attacks on the Red Sea.
From Suez Canal revenue because of this insanity.
100%. Now, Ruthie, I do want to turn to you because, I mean, it's interesting that we decide now, if we decide now, of course, we don't know what's going to be, but if we do determine we have had some strikes to make such a bold move as to target the airport, is that any, why now? Is that any different than any of the other attacks just because it hit down at Ben Gurion Airport?
Yes, unfortunately, because I think that every strike should be treated, and not just from Yemen, from Gaza, from Lebanon. I think one of our problems with what we call the conceptia is, okay, we all know how to run to bomb shelters. We know what to do when there's a siren. We are fortunate to have Iron Dome and Arrow and all these things over the years. But those missiles, first of all, many of them, also from Gaza and from Yemen for sure, actually did hurt people, did land, not all of them, not most of them, but still. And I think that to treat a rocket, for example, that falls in a kindergarten, just because the children weren't there, as though nothing happened, thank God. No. Now, because this hit Ben Gurion Airport, really inside, almost near the terminal, and shrapnel landed in the arrivals and departures of the area where cars drive up to pick up people or to leave off people.
No, it was
massive.
It's a miracle that so few people were harmed.
It's a miracle. So as a result, that's why now, because up until now, the United States said, you know what, let us do this. We're bombing the Houthis, stay out of it. Well, we couldn't stay out of it anymore. We have also struck Yemen a few times in the past, not many. This is a larger strike. I have to say, unfortunately, I agree with Dan that, airstrikes don't deter these bloodthirsty terrorists who have really nothing to lose. They don't care about. But we needed to do it.
We need to show.
I think it will be a signal to the international coalition and to the Arab countries that they have to do something if the airport is being attacked. In other words, you keep raising the ante until the situation becomes completely inadmissible. I agree with Ruthie. It should have been inadmissible from the minute they started not only firing at Israel, but impeding maritime traffic. They've impeded about a third of global container traffic headed up the Red Sea. It is ridiculous, and we've normalized it, all of us. The Americans, the Arabs, the Israelis, all of us have normalized what is lunacy.
Right, 100%. And it will be if we attack the airport, an eye for an eye. Ben Gurion Airport, Sana'a Airport. Let's see how it goes. But I do want to bring us back to the idea of a ground offensive. You mentioned potentially a ground offensive in Yemen.
Not by Israel.
Not by Israel, but this one will be by Israel, right? We're inside Gaza as we speak now. And the Prime Minister and the Security Cabinet has said that barring any major changes by Trump's visit next week to the area, we will escalate in the Gaza Strip. You will see many more troops be called up, and we will go out in an all-out offensive that could involve occupying parts of the Gaza Strip. Dan, is that the right move, or is that a dangerous mistake?
No, I think it's not only the wrong move, but also probably the product of spectacular cynicism on the part of the government. Look, I have great sympathy for the desire to eradicate Hamas and grind them into the dust, and it would be a favor to the Palestinians for them to not be in any way in charge of governance of Gaza after the war is over. But many of us predicted from the beginning that the twin goals of removing Hamas and rescuing the hostages are in opposition, because you cannot go all the way in crushing Hamas when they hold the hostages without sacrificing the hostages, which Israel never could. And so I think after 600 days, the idea of doing more of the same, maybe more the same, but a bit stronger, is clearly not the way to go. If they do this, it will result in the deaths of more soldiers, tragically, and probably more hostages. And obviously huge amounts of Palestinians, and that will bring upon Israel more international condemnation, more costs, more disruption to Israeli society. And if, God forbid, the end game really is, as some of the more lunatic fringes of the government are suggesting, a permanent occupation of Gaza, that is simply unbelievably stupid.
But I don't think anybody's saying a permanent occupation is a temporary. What the government is saying a temporary, permanent, in order to answer the government and extend the military presence.
Hold on, they're talking about a forever war that will certainly last through the next election. Now, the problem is, what makes this toxic is the clear impression that the reason why they violated the ceasefire, and I hate to say it, Israel violated the ceasefire that Israel signed. The reason they did that and now resumed the war and now want to intensify the resumption of the war is because the right wing demands it, and Netanyahu's decision has been to simply prolong the life of his coalition, whatever the cost. Now, I know this sounds cynical.
Ruthie, I need you to respond.
Half the public,
I'm sorry,
53% of the public, yesterday in a poll yesterday, says this is what they think.
100%. But Ruthie,
okay, so first of all, no. This has nothing to do with Netanyahu's coalition. It does have to do with problems with, first of all, the Biden administration that initially was running the show during the first part of the war. Occupying Gaza militarily is a necessity. It should have happened right from the beginning of the war, rather than going in, going out, as we've been doing for the last 18 years, all right? And I have a son who fought there so many times. It was like, okay, he's going to be 100 years old and still doing that? No. It is clear that the only thing really that Hamas cares about is land and all that. First of all, we need, for security purposes, to have military control. Now, the division in the coalition, there are members of the coalition who believe that reoccupying Gaza means Jewish settlement in Gaza. That's the thing that Netanyahu said, no, I'm not pushing for that. That's the thing, not about the military occupation. I think now he's come to realize there's no choice. And what's more, that does make a difference in how the war is being conducted right now.
Well, how is the international community going to react, Dan?
Monday CRM has the best AI features in the game.
Especially in sales.
Hands down.
So for me, email composition works like magic. You know me, I'm not a great writer, but AI helps me keep it super professional, super engaging, no more.
That's not even a problem. They'll react badly, of course. But the real problem is that for a nation of 10 million, 7.5 million Jews, 1.5 million which don't serve in the army, by the way, to occupy not just the West Bank with the mishmash you have there with the PA autonomy zones, but to fully occupy a very hostile area of over 2 million Palestinians would be unbelievably costly and damaging and simply won't work. It just won't work. And Israel left in 2005 after almost 30 years of full occupation for a reason, because it was a disaster.
It was untenable because so many soldiers were being killed.
Yes. And every economist in Israel will tell you that the billions that this will cost will be ruinous to the economy, but it certainly won't get back the hostages. What it will cause probably is the death of the hostages, many, many lives of soldiers, and insurgency in an occupied area until Israel wakes up again and gets out. There is a much better way that involves basically an improved version of the Arab plan to hand the Gaza Strip back over to the PA with Arab League support. And I know the government, and Ruthie Shirley will soon tell us this.
I hear her sighing.
The government has demonized the PA to a degree that is farcical, and they actually send their spokespeople to say that the PA is just like Hamas. This is beyond idiotic. It's an insult to the intelligence. There's problems with the PA, which is why they need reforming. And the Arab plan would see Gaza run by the PA with massive Arab help, massive Western help, possibly massive Israeli help. And the missing bit is that the original Arab plan that they pulled together in their panic after Trump spoke of depopulating Gaza about a month and a half ago, the Arab League plan.
I think that's still on the table for some Israelis.
I think we've sort of edged away from it, sort of snickering at how funny it was. The missing bit is the demilitarization of Hamas, basically. They need to hand over their weapons. They need to agree to exile for leaders. Whatever it is, we can't have a Hezbollah scenario.
When apples grow on cherry trees, they're going to put down their weapons. This is what I say. The PA, it's a farce to say that the PA is a partner for anything. We've seen it again and again. All they do, the PA is responsible for the radicalization of Hamas. The PA teaches the children their school books to hate Jews, to martyr themselves. The PA pays stipends to terrorist families, including Hamas terrorists. The PA is not a partner for any kind of peace. The PA is an evil entity. You say they're not as bad as Hamas. I don't know. There's the Boston Strangler and Jack the Ripper. You choose.
Oh, there's a broken leg and there's pancreatic cancer. You know?
I wouldn't call the PA a broken leg. I would call it way worse than that.
Ruthie, maybe you should speak to Israeli security and Shin Bet and the military and every single general in charge of the West Bank, and they will tell you that more or less the peace has been kept in West Bank for the past 30 years, essentially.
Well, especially the last 18 months.
Because of the PA, and despite the fact that Israel is under such pressure internationally with idiot protesters all over American campuses, the PA has maintained the security collaboration in the West Bank throughout.
In the areas
the
where they
demonization
can.
of the
I was just
PA
in Shechem last
is an
week.
own goal.
I was just in Nablus last week. And I had briefings by the mayor, the governor, somebody head of refugee camp, military, etc. And what I understood is, yes, in areas like Nablus, for example, the PA has done exactly what you just described.
And Ramallah.
But in Jenin and in other areas, they have lost complete control. It is extremely weak, extremely corrupt.
But that's different. Jenin,
so the question is, how
strong.
will they go and take over Gaza if they can't manage their own territory?
That's why I'm saying it will require the entire Arab League to cease washing its hands of Gaza and enable and assist the PA in pacifying Gaza and disarming Hamas. And I agree with you that Hamas is not going to be easily disarmed. But if the two choices on the table are either this cataclysmic scenario of an Israeli occupation, which will be terrible for everyone and which the Palestinians don't want, versus a $100 billion reconstruction plan, the PA taking over with the entire world support and an end to the disaster that Hamas has brought upon them, the pressure on Hamas will be so great that I'm not sure it'll be resistible. I'm not suggesting that they're going to sign on a dotted line and get out of the way immediately, but these are two radically different scenarios, and not to even try the scenario I'm proposing, honestly, is very foolish.
Well, I have to ask you, Ruthie. I mean, the hostages, right? So we've learned through, Trump making statements, Netanyahu making statements, that perhaps even 24 are not still alive. And we have fought for 18 months plus straight through. What is really going to be different if we go in and fight now? I mean, honestly.
Look, it's because of the hostages. This is why it gets me very angry when people say that the government doesn't care about the hostages. It's precisely because of the hostages that this war has been dragging out. Precisely because we're concerned about the hostages. Aside from the fact that in the beginning of the war, we also had to contend with this issue of how many innocent Palestinians we were killing. But the hostages were a huge concern, all right? That's why it is taking so long. Now, that's not to say that I think every single Israeli has a broken heart over those hostages. First of all, we all either know hostages, know families of hostages. We all have sons in the army or fathers in the army or whatever, okay? So while my son is looking for hostages, to say that we don't care about them is ridiculous. But yes, It is possible. Yes, they're in danger, but they're in danger no matter what. You realize these are bloodthirsty animals.
Ruthie, you realize that there's a deal on the table where Hamas agrees to hand them all over if Israel ends the war.
If Israel ends the war,
Correct.
we can't end that war and leave Hamas in power. Are you kidding me? And have another October 7th again and again? You talk about the money.
Back to what I said before. There's an
alternative.
There is an alternative, and the reason why ending the war means Hamas staying in power is because the government has prevented any discussion of an alternative to Hamas, has demonized the PA, has been indifferent to American and Arab plans to do a day-after plan in Gaza that would move Hamas aside. Now, I'm as skeptical as the next person on the details of that plan, but the government has blocked any discussion, and that is why presently in Israel, more than half the population, and about 2/3 of those responding, are convinced that the war is being prolonged for political reasons because clearly the far right threatens plausibly to bring down the government
So hold
if
on.
the war is ended.
I want to play the devil advocate.
Okay.
Let's say that Dan is correct, okay? That that the government does not want to talk about the day after. Or let's say that Dan is incorrect and the PA plan cannot be implemented. Ruthie, what does the day after look like then? How do we move forward? Let's say we go in, we occupy forever, or what happens?
Okay, look, I think there are certain things, like anything in life, in history for sure, you can't always see around the corner, right? You have to do the best you can with what you have, with the facts you have, and you wait for certain things to change. For example, we couldn't have anticipated the Abraham Accords. Things change. If Iran, for example, if Iran is defeated, if the mullahs are defeated in Iran, that also changes the Middle East. To decide what do you mean we're going to occupy for 12 years, 10 years? What we have seen is everything we've tried with the Palestinians. I don't even like to call them that, okay, but never mind. With the Arabs who call themselves Palestinians, all right, in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. What we've seen is that no peace process has ended in anything with those people other than war. We've seen that to say, why don't we try? That's the biggest joke of all. And let me also point out something. The idea, it is true that the government might fall if certain, the only way it could fall is if internal.
And God forbid Netanyahu's not.
No, I'm not so sure. It depends, okay? Because we have different issues that might topple the government, and I'm not so sure that the people who threatened to quit if in the event that. But that's not the issue.
Won't take the chance.
But that's not the issue. It depends what polls you rely on, but I got to tell you, we see there's a lot of, no, not all of them. There's also a lot of misinformation, and there's also a misinformation about the way the polls are.
Ruthie, a question before I run out of time. How long do you give it? It's been a year and a half of this policy. Mayan asks, okay, why do you think it'll work this time?
It's different this time.
Insist on an answer.
But it's different this time. What do you?
The military has said that they have maxed out on what they can realistically do under the current in the current landscape.
They're going to be, if they clear out a section of Gaza that had terrorists in it by killing all the terrorists, they're going to stay there instead of having to do it
have
again.
enough capacity to do that? Because you just mentioned your son, 100 times going into Gaza. Our reservists are tired. Will we have enough soldiers in this country to carry out an operation like that?
They're showing up for the 4th tour of duty. We were warned.
Fewer and fewer are showing up.
No, fewer and fewer. I don't know. There's 100% showing up so far.
No. There was 100% and even 110% because people came who weren't called up in a week after October 7th.
No, I'm talking about now.
Right now, increasingly, people are not showing up.
I don't know about increasingly, but those who are showing up, there's nearly 100%.
People,
but how long?
The soldiers in Israel are absolutely collapsing under the weight of 300 days of reserve.
I have to ask you a question. You asked Ruthie the question, what's different now? But I have to ask you the same thing. She pointed out something very important. She said that every time that we have tried to achieve peace with the Palestinian people, it has failed and ended in war. Why would this be different?
I'm not talking about peace with the Palestinian people.
Why would this be different in Gaza?
No,
why would it work?
I'm talking about an accommodation that ends the war and gets back the hostages and puts maximal pressure on Hamas to disarm. And at best, in coming years, the Palestinians will have an accommodation. This is not some notion of idyllic peace with the Palestinians. But I do think in the long term, Israel, no matter what happens and no matter who says what the Palestinians do, Israel strategically has two choices in the long term. One, be together with the Palestinians and permanent enmeshing in the West Bank and who knows, maybe now in Gaza. That's a binational state in the end of the Zionist project. Or it finds some way to partition and separate from them. You can call it peace and you can call it something else. But there's no third way.
Okay,
Excuse
Ruthie,
me, you
respond
act-
on this is the
Okay,
last
Dan-
comment of the show.
Dan, you act as though we didn't try that. That was what the disengagement from Gaza was
happy
all
with the
about. Let's
binational state?
separate. I'm not. I'm
I have
saying
news for
that
you. It'll be called Palestine.
No, we've tried.
Because the Jews will leave.
We have separated from them. We did it.
No, we did not.
Disengagement. No, and then there were people, many people who were for the disengagement plan said we have to do the same thing in Judea and Samaria. It hasn't worked. All it did was create a terrorist state.
It actually created October 7th.
Yes.
Do you know who maintained Gaza rule in the West Bank for the past 15 years? It was Netanyahu and the government who believed ridiculously that it's a good thing to have Hamas in Gaza because that creates a division between the Palestinians.
Excuse me, thanks to the military and security establishment that, by the way, didn't inform Netanyahu what was happening on October 7th. But leading up to that, all of them, they're all guilty of that false
Please don't
conception.
vehiculate this calumny. You know, there are people in Israel who believe right now that the Shin Bet not only should have known and didn't issue enough warnings, though they did, but actually knew of the attack and encouraged Hamas and held open a door. Now, this is a blood libel.
No,
It's
that's
a blood
not what I
libel
said. That's not what I said. That's not
It
what
may
I
not be
said.
what you said,
Nope.
but it's
But
what's
it's WhatsApp.
happening in WhatsApp groups run by the government supporters, and it is just nuts. These constant attacks on the military are not by you, Ruthie, I know you mean well, but by some of the extremists, border on unpatriotic.
So with that, we're going to have to end the show because unfortunately we are out of time tonight. This time next week, we will probably know if this idea of reoccupying Gaza is real. Donald Trump will come to the region and we'll see what happens with the hostage deal with Hamas. So thank you very much, Ruthie and Dan, for being here tonight. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.